Not only is she a business owner and an attorney, but she also was appointed as the Deputy Undersecretary for Rural Development during the Obama administration, an era for which we all long at this point. But she recently ran a very close congressional campaign, and she and Kendall Scudder are the co-founders and co-anchors of the very popular podcast, Pod Bless Texas. I give you Lillian Salerno.
Thank you, Carol, for the kind introduction, and welcome folks that are listening to our great candidates, Candace Valenzuela and Colonel Kim Olsen, where we're trying to make sure everybody's getting to hear the message. The most important message for sure for Congressional District 24 is to take out the Republican who's he's retiring. It's one of our most exciting congressional districts that we have the ability to win, and we have two great candidates, and that'll be in a runoff on July 14th. First, I'd like to introduce Kim Olsen. She served as a U.S. Air Force from 1979 to 2005 and reached the rank of colonel. She graduated from The Ohio State University. She has a long career, including worker as the director of human resources for the Dallas County ISD and CEO of Grace After Fire. And she is a former candidate for the Texas Railroad Commission, agricultural commissioner, which she gave a real scare to the incumbent, who's one of the worst agricultural commissioners in the country, Sid Miller. And she is running to be the Democratic nominee. And then we have Candace Venezuela, who's a member of the Carrollton Farmers Branch Independent School District Board of Trustees at large. And she assumed office in 2017, and her current term ends in 2020. And Candace serves as the Carrollton Farmers Branch on the Board of Trustees, and she has experienced her own family's financial struggles growing up and has a tremendous video that explains that all of us love and get teary-eyed when we watch. She highlights in her campaign fiscal transparency and access to education and healthcare, and has a young family. And we're excited to have both these candidates here. And first, I'd like to also thank the sponsors for this town hall, which is the Tillotson Law Firm and the Honorable Carol and Dan Donovan, and this meeting sponsor, the Honorable Terry Barker and Dr. Catalina Garcia, who's always so lovely, and the law firm of Hamilton Wingo. So with that said, I think that we'll let the candidates just have a little opening statement, and we'll start with Kim Olsen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again, Dallas, for hosting this. Thank you to our great chair out there, Carol Donovan. It's been a long journey for us, hasn't it? And it's good to see your beautiful face. Lillian, as always, I love powerful women who get shit done, so good for you. I just want to reach out and remind everyone that, this is hard. What we're in right now is hard. And I just want to say, as a veteran and as a woman who worked for 5 years with vets coming out of combat, if you're struggling at all, it's okay. Because, I just want you to acknowledge that this is unusual. We are social creatures. And if you're struggling in any way, the first thing is to admit it and be okay with it. And then the second is to reach out and find someone that can help you. And so I want to throw that out, because we had a big veterans town hall with mental health providers. And I think sometimes mental health is not really addressed like it should. So hang in there, everybody. This will end. It will. And we have an opportunity to build a better America on the backside of it. And just, if I could, Lillian, remind me how much time, because our correspondent said we had 20 minutes, and I think that's changed.
Yeah, maybe 5 or 8 minutes here.
Okay. So what I want to do is really talk about what we've done as a campaign as we've jumped out in front of this thing. And I'm sure all of you on this call got letters and phone calls from Ketty Marchant, right? I mean, he reached out and talked to all of you, asked how you were. No, no, I see no's. Okay. So what was nice is in the void of the leadership that we've had in this district for the last 10 years, that's what we did. I mean, I just stepped in, became the congresswoman I'm fixing to be. And so the first thing we did, as many of you might know, is we called out to thousands of people within our district, did welfare checks. I pivoted my huge volunteer base, and they went and, like I said, did call outs. We've done things like given 50 hours and partnered with the People Power with the Beto team in order to do food banking. We're doing a mass drive right here in our district to relieve some of those first responders so that they can get the appropriate mass that they need. We have done town halls every Wednesday night with different expertise, from scientists to doctors to economists. Last night we had homeschool moms, so all you moms out there that got babies at home, we feel your pain. We last night, like I said, had mental health providers around PTS, which a lot of folks this will be a triggering device event for them. And we will continue next week. We have some experts on immigration, especially since Trump just announced, is one of his stupid, policies about stopping visas and closing border immigration. So that's the big things that the campaign has done. We set up an advisory council made up of Dr. Began, Richard Plains. We have several prominent leaders within the district that have stepped up with this. And of course, we put all things COVID on our website. So we try to keep it up to date, we watch it. And so that's kind of what the team is doing. But the last thing I think, and the most important thing we're doing right now, and if you're a Democrat out there, this must be our laser focus. And that is in getting folks to request mail-in ballots. This is the thing we must do because of two reasons. One, it is an insurance policy for us to make sure that just because we're in COVID doesn't mean our Democratic voices cannot be heard and your vote gets squashed somehow. So it's very important that those that are eligible within our district, which there are a number, that we need to be calling them, emailing them, whatever it takes to get them to request those mail-in ballots. So that's the first thing. And the second is, and the reason we want to do this is because you don't want to look like Wisconsin. We must get the system to exercise what it takes in order to review those ballots and have them count. Of course, Carol knows this from running, all kinds of voting centers, because right now, just in Tarrant County alone, there are 40,000 people that are eligible to vote by mail, just the standard law, not the one we've just sued, because they're going to take that to Fifth Circuit. I can guarantee you that. And of that, only about 7,000 to 9,000 actually executed that. So it is in our interest as a party that we make sure that every single person who is eligible to vote by mail gets that done. They get their voice heard, and it helps us practice in the system, because it's going to be absolutely essential come November when we finally get rid of this administration, hold the House, and swap that Senate. So that's sort of my round the world of what we've done. And then I'll close with this. Look, and I know you guys are going to ask us questions all about this, but I'm going to say two things right up front, because I really kind of need to get this off my chest. This is a time for our party to make a change in this state like nothing we've seen in 3 decades. We worked our butts off to flip houses, to flip some of these congressional districts in our state. And it is incumbent upon us Democrats to hang tough together, no matter where you're standing on our Democratic spectrum. And those that attack other Democrats and those that don't defend other Democrats might as well run for or work for Republicans, because you are doing their work for them. So I am adamant about supporting and helping all the Dems across this state and across our district in order to get this done. So I say that because we have a chance to flip our Senate, to hold our House with a huge majority, to change out the administration. And the biggest thing is to turn our Texas House blue, have a say in redistricting, and finally let Texas play on a national stage as Democrats. And I'll leave it back to you, Lillian.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim. That was really, really inspirational. And I know you're doing a lot of things for your constituents. And now we'll hear from Candace, and excited to hear from you, Candace, and give us 10 minutes for an opening.
Hi, Lillian. Thank you so much. As you probably know, I've been a gigantic super fan of Pod Bless Texas since its very inception. I really appreciate the coverage and the humor you've brought to our state and federal government. You've elegantly filled a void. I don't know if you would always call it elegant, but thank you so much for what you do for the rest of us. My name is Candace Valenzuela, and I am running for Congress in Texas's 24th district. When I win, I'll be the first Black Latina woman ever elected to United States Congress, not just for this district, not just for the state, but for the entire country. Since the primary, we've been able to build a whole lot of momentum. Just afterward, I got the endorsement of Jan McDowell, who'd run here a couple of times before and had put a lot of effort into building a grassroots movement, and I'm honored to have her support here. I got the support of Representative Julie Johnson, a rock star in the Texas legislature, who helped personally my school district keep $37 million of its recapture money so that we're able to better serve our kids and our district now. And I'm so grateful for Julie's work and for her support. And just recently, I've gotten the support of Secretary Castro, and I'm the first tri-caucus candidate of 2020. That means the Black, Latino, and Asian Pacific Islander caucuses in Congress have all endorsed me, as well as the Progressive Caucus. And I'm excited because the kind of coalitions it's going to take on a Trump-endorsed person like Beth Van Dyne is going to have to be from the grassroots all the way to the top. We're going to need the broadest based coalition, a diverse coalition, because these folks are going to throw everything they have at us. They're going to throw every name they could possibly think to throw at us. And that preparation is what I'm bringing here. The reason I'm running for Congress is kind of the same reason I ran for school board. And let me just amend really quickly. I'm not on the school board now. I stepped down just before the primary season. But I ran because the opportunities that helped me go from being homeless as a child and living in a kiddie pool outside of a gas station with my brother, to the first in my family to go to college, to the first woman of color on the school board in Carrollton Farmers Branch has been under attack since the inception of this administration. But quite frankly, that's just so quaint to say right now, because everything has been under attack by this administration. And the things that I've been talking about all along, making sure that families have those opportunities that we've all been promised. If we work hard in this country, we should be able to get food on our tables. We should be able to keep a roof over our heads. And we're supposed to be able to educate our children or see the children of our community educated. And this administration wants no part in that. Dan Patrick wants no part in that. When he says that he wants to save this country for his children and his grandchildren, he doesn't mean that in the cute macro sense we normally mean that, like our children, our grandchildren. He means his children. He means his grandchildren. He means the people who are ensconced in the type of money that they've taken away from the rest of us. And in terrible, terrible ways through awful governance. I've had the opportunity firsthand to experience what government can do well, getting housing through HUD, getting food stamps in the form of the Lone Star card, and having a home and public education. That's not just something that helped me to survive. It's helped me to kind of stress test the system. It wasn't something I was intentionally doing as a kid. One day I'd like to use this to run for Congress. But it is an education in how these things can work well. And I bring that with me to every aspect of my governance. On the school board, I pushed hard for one-to-one devices. Every kid, from first grade or pre-K to first grade, they have iPads because their little thumbs and little fingers can't type well. And upwards beyond that, they have Chromebooks. And so now as school districts are scrambling to get devices home so that they can continue to educate our kids, many of our kids haven't missed a beat. Now, structurally, we still have the issue of lacking Wi-Fi for all of our children. And that's a battle that we're fighting, just like many folks across DFW are fighting. We're trying to buy hotspots and trying to leverage whatever community resources we have available, but we're not completely behind the curve there. As our food service workers and our janitorial staff are still serving right now, I pushed to get them a 10% increase in pay. And now I don't have to worry about them also having to go to the food bank where while the food bank is already overburdened or having to rely on free and reduced lunch, which we don't have reduced lunch in the district anymore. We got rid of it. It's all free lunch for all of those kids. They don't have to rely on that. Well, and the district is experiencing record highs and kids who are dependent on that. And it's good to know that our workers don't have to do that. And that hasn't always been the case. So I am so pleased to be here to be able to talk to you, have this one-to-one interface, sort of. And I'm really hoping to earn your support. We need a different kind of leader to win here, the kind of leader that doesn't just have governing experience that is exclusive and a part of this district, but also the kind of leader that understands the urgency that each of these systems have with them. So thank you very much. And I look forward to your questions.
Great. Well, thank you, Candace. And just for folks know, they can type the questions so that we can ask if you've got some. We've got some general questions that folks have sent, and then there's some specific ones. So I thought we just start with what's on everyone's mind is this COVID-24, CD24, COVID-19, and we just like to know. We'll start with you, Candace, while you're up. Do you believe that this idea of opening up our economy at this time is something that if you were serving in Congress right now that you would support? I mean, you wouldn't have direct say over what happens in Dallas County, but would you support that, or how are you feeling about COVID-19? Give us what you think we're doing right and wrong.
Well, first off, I am very empathetic to the families that are struggling to make ends meet right now, that need income and don't have it. And, I think it's the responsibility of our state and federal government to make sure that workers are provided for. Other countries have found solutions to this. They've kept businesses in business by subsidizing those businesses to pay their workers. And I think that is the solution we should be looking toward before opening up the economy and exposing everybody to disease, exposing everyone to injury. I'm talking to a lot of vulnerable communities. I'm living with vulnerable family members myself. For a while, my 71-year-old mother-in-law had a really scary cough. She lost her sense of taste, her sense of smell, and we couldn't get a test because she didn't have a fever long enough, but had a cough for weeks. My son, my 1-year-old, just had a ear tube surgery. So he's a part of that vulnerable population as well. And we're not going to be venturing out at all. And I think a lot about the families that we don't necessarily think of as vulnerable. Many of us are, but we still need to survive and we still need to eat. And we shouldn't be put in a position where we're risking our lives. So we need to listen to scientists. We need to flatten the curve, and we need to support our economy and our people in order to make sure that we safely come out of this mess and have a thriving economy too.
Great. Great response. Kim, just to follow up on the COVID-19, tell us what your vision of reopening the economy would look like.
Well, I think what COVID-19 has done is not just showed the cracks and the fissures that are in our society right now. It's shown that we have a Grand Canyon. I mean, we're out here lauding the health workers that are on the front line, and then we woefully underfund healthcare for the most essential people out there. Those that are driving the trucks, those that are working the warehouses, those that are stocking the food shelves, those technicians, not just the docs and the nurses, but the technicians on the front lines in all of our medical system. And then we sit out there and say, oh, these essential workers are keeping us well, and yet we push back hard when they want a livable wage and a minimum wage of $15 an hour. So this COVID-19 is actually a point in which we can leap off and fundamentally pivot this country to be the better country that she is. Part of that, Lillian and the rest of you on here, it knows reopening our economy. But just as my opponent said, we have to be thoughtful. We have to listen to the experts. And I think what is frightening is the longer this goes, the more insane, if I can just say, that the president is becoming. And I know some of you saw that where he talked about intaking, disinfectants into your body to somehow clean your lungs out. I'm saying this, do not do that. It will make you sick and you probably will die. So, you know, unless our president's starting to advocate for suicide, something is very wrong in DC. And you better send leaders who have experience in large bureaucracies, understand the interconnectability between the economy and the working family, appreciate what it takes on the political structures to get stuff done, and that will have a strong, experienced, powerful voice in order to advocate for Texas. So let's just talk about Texas real quick. When we went into our 2008 crash, for those of that you were young or don't have gray hair or chemically altered gray hair, 2008, oil was sitting at $100 a barrel. It dropped, but because we had a strong energy system here in our state, we didn't struggle as much as some of the other states did across our nation. You guys know what futures are on a barrel of oil today? Want to guess? I think it's in the negatives.
Negative 37.
So the number one economic driver for our state has just collapsed out from underneath us. But if you're an environmentalist, if you think we ought to go to alternative energies, then there are things we can do as soon as this economy opens back up. Not to put people back in coal mines, not to punch more holes into our earth, but to fundamentally change the power structure and the power providers for our, and I know you're going to ask about the economy later, but this is an incredible opportunity in Congress when you get there. Because look, the repair of our nation and our economy isn't coming this fall. It's coming next January with hopefully the new Senate, the new president, and then the new House. And so what you want is someone with visions who can say, okay, here's what we can do with our energy system. Here's what we can do with our agriculture system. Here's where we can sit and we can fundamentally pivot this country for the better. Because if we go back to the way it was, the next time we have a pandemic, the same thing's going to happen. So we have to have leaps now as we reopen this economy and make sure that back to again, our point is folks feel safe, because if you don't feel safe, what are you going to make me go out and shop, Dan Patrick? I don't think so. So we have to make people feel safe. So get test kits at home, make sure that folks understand what it takes in order to go out and keep themselves and their families safe. And on a personal note, I'm sure all of you know someone who's been touched by the COVID-19. I lost my cousin in the beginning of last month to this very thing. So it is deadly and it is devastating for all of us.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Kim. Candace, to talk about, I know you talk about healthcare and have a vision of what kind of healthcare system would work out based on your experience and what you experienced as a child. And tell us, what is your position, Candace, on healthcare?
I'm advocating for a strong public option. And the reason is I know that we need to be able to cover everyone. But I also know that a lot of folks have negotiated for their health insurance if they're union members, or they just happen to like their health insurance as it is. Again, I'm a child of two veterans, and as a person who's had to take her older mother to the VA hospital, things don't always go great. I can understand why people might be skeptical of government-sponsored healthcare. Now, what I will say about that is one of the big reasons that it isn't working the way that it isn't because our military folks are not up to the task they are, but they're severely underfunded. It's one of the reasons I'm pushing so hard for campaign finance reform, because until we have campaign finance reform, it doesn't matter what option that you're pushing for. And I'm definitely pushing so that we can expand Medicare and be able to negotiate for prescription drugs. We're not going to be able to serve people until our political system does. And so I am very sympathetic to the folks that don't feel as though a public option is good for them. But for the rest of us, we need to have healthcare, and particularly, during a global pandemic, we understand that healthcare isn't an individual care issue. It's a health security issue. It's a national security issue. When we have contagions ripping through this country because people are afraid to take time off, to get treated, to stay home, to recuperate, we are constantly at risk. So I'm, during this pandemic, I'm so happy that in our next round of legislation, we should be seeing more tests, better science coming out, but we're woefully behind. And one of the things that I'm going to be pushing for when I am in Congress is to restore those systems we had to protect us that were there in place before during the Obama administration, and making sure that we replenish our PPE and making sure that our hospitals are taken care of, and restoring a lot of our hospitals in our rural areas as well, because I know that they're suffering. If they last in this crisis, we need to save them. And if they don't, we need to try to get them back. It's absolutely critical.
Thank you, Candace. Thank you. Candace, while we have you, what other than COVID-19, and I know you talk about healthcare, what is the other issue that you're hearing from your constituents that's maybe pre-COVID-19 that you were hearing about that's one of the tenets that you'll go to Congress and fight for? Or what are you hearing out there?
Another thing I'm hearing about is wages not keeping up with cost of living. And of course, as a school board trustee, I don't know whether it's how I am and people know that about me, or how people are concerned. I hear a lot about our education, whether or not kids can go to school and learn in a healthy, safe fashion, so that they can learn without getting shot. I'm hearing a lot of concerns from parents about the way that our system of education is not quite keeping up with the needs that we have now. And some people say, well, that's a state issue. But when we're talking about, say, our free and reduced lunch program right now that is woefully overburdened in a global pandemic, we need to make sure that we have some sort of crisis assistant for schools, because as we're seeing these schools close down, they've been providing a lot of social services beyond what they've been expected. Many of the principals I had the pleasure of serving were working as social workers. Many of the teachers were working as social workers, and that wasn't a part of their job descriptions. And now that they're not physically interfacing with a lot of these kids and these families, folks are going hungry. Folks are having a hard time getting to services. So making sure that our schools are crisis ready, disaster ready, is one of the things that I'd been talking about even before COVID. And making sure that we have universal, full day, high quality pre-K and early childhood childcare, because a lot of these problems we head off at the pass in terms of academic difficulties, learning disabilities, the school to prison pipeline. All of these things are actually well serviced by having access to early childhood childcare and pre-K. And it has a lot of immediate economic benefit now when you have parents who want to go back to work, getting to go and work at the capacity that they feel is necessary. And, we don't lose people in the economy because they're thinking, I pay about as much as a mortgage, if not more, for childcare, and my job is not going to bring that much in, or it's going to just match that. I know a surgeon in this district, or not a surgeon. He said, well, yes, he's a pediatric surgeon. And he was looking at what it would take for him to make the money that he was making. And he also had twins. And, he took a long leave of absence because he said, I'm basically working to not see these two kids. It's that expensive. This is not somebody by any stretch of the imagination who isn't educated, who doesn't have the means to support himself, but costs have just gotten out of control. So I'm working really hard to make sure that we prioritize those things in our budget.
Great. Kim, Colonel, one thing that we are hearing, and I'm taking some live questions from some of the folks listening. I'm just now reading one of them. The question is, Kim, if for some reason the world is so off kilter that Donald Trump is elected again, what protections would you support to rein in the president's attempts to control everything? Whether it's stronger inspector generals, or just what kind of way could we make sure that we protect our democracy if this president is reelected?
And that's a very fair and actually quite a frightening question. And it's a frightening look way ahead, if you will, that what do we do if this guy gets reelected? And not to give you a civics course 101 here, but remember, the forefathers set up this nation so that there were checks and balances. So we didn't have a dictator, a king, or a guy that becomes a tyranny. And trust me, I've walked in the post-combat eras of folks that have lived under that, and it ain't pretty, and we don't want that, y'all. And so I think the best way you do that, and for the one person that's asking, is, money and the control of the money and how the purse strings of your tax dollars get spent is the best way to control someone who's out of control in the administration. So that's number one. That's kind of how we are set up. And that is done through, all the authorizations, the appropriations bill, then they send it over to the Senate, and then the Senate does what it's going to do. So the first thing you would do is, number one, you'd have to swap the Senate. And again, I think we have the greatest chance of swapping our Senates. There are 4 states right now that are toss-ups around this. And if we can get that Senate turned, and then we in the House can then work across the aisle, across the hallway, if you've ever been to the Capitol, and work to rebuild our country, because you're going to have to rebuild it after this. So the first is to get your Senate swapped. The second is to make sure that you put very explicit language in there such that he can't do what he did in the defense, which was to say, I'm going to take money from veterans. I'm going to take money from the VA system. I'm going to take money from housing the working military families who are living in substandard housing. And I'm going to take that money and I'm going to go over here and build a wall, which is what he did with the $8 billion last summer. You got to make sure you put language in there and understand what that means. And a great example is when they passed the PPP, right? When they passed the protection for small businesses below 500 people. All of us out here thought, great, Congress is going to help our local business person, anybody with less than 500 employees. And who got $20 million? Remember? Ruth, right? A chain. A guy that's wealthy beyond whatever. Who else got money? The guy, Mr. American Pillow, who gave money to Donald Trump's campaign. I mean, so you got to be careful when you're writing these languages to make sure that you can hold the administration in check and in balance. And then the other thing that you do, which I'm going to harken back to because Texas is key to what's going to happen, heaven forbid, in 2024, is to get your local folks swapped. We've got 5 Texas House seats sitting under the umbrella of 24. And you got to have a candidate that has staying power, that has the capacity to outraise the Republican, which is what we've done to date. We've outraised her in different quarters. We've outraised her, and show those machines that Texans are ready to swap this district. And I think that's why I have more Texas donors than anybody that's running in this race right now, because they understand how important it is to swap this district, and then the trickle down effect that it will have when we turn our Texas House blue. And the last thing I'll say is, it's a sad day, or it's an interesting day, I guess, because you have the President of the United States acting one way, and then you have incredible leaders like Judge Jenkins, who stood up and said, nope, this is how Dallas is going to do it. And they actually led the way for the rest of the state to keep us safe. And that gave us great, I think, confidence. When you look at states in which they said, like Florida and some of the other guys out there that said, no, it's okay. They suffered incredible economic consequences and incredible death consequences. And so it's not just about the decisions you make, it's about how you make them. And whether you're the kind of leader that's going to calm the waters, have a steady hand on the helm like the New York leader is, or you're going to be the out of control, drink bleach guy like Donald Trump. I mean, it matters how you lead, not just what you lead. And I think we're seeing that play out today, Lillian. Great question, whoever had that one.
Yeah, good questions coming. This one's for Candace. Candace, as you know, the president has suspended all immigration for 60 days, and the U.S. is a country of immigrants, and everyone has come from somewhere except for the Native Americans. For you, as someone who would be involved in any kind of a immigration reform if you're elected, what is your stance on immigration, and how do you feel about the 60-day suspension on all immigration?
Well, I grew up in El Paso, Texas. I grew up steeped in a lot of the consequences and benefits of immigration policy and how it's evolved in this country. And I got to say that growing up, El Paso was constantly rated as one of the safest cities in the country. What the president has been saying about immigrants, we know as Democrats, and I think that most of the country knows, is a terrible mischaracterization. And the way that our system is set up right now, it's not just cruel, it's just economically stupid. The fact that we're incarcerating so many folks when we know that, when you have people check in with ICE on a regular basis, one, we save money on housing, and two, we save money on all of the critical care that you might have to provide with somebody that you are housing and keeping in their care. We can let people check back in. It has something crazy like a 95% check-in rate. When we focus on getting out criminals instead of getting out 5-year-old Guatemalans, we have a lot better country. We have a lot stronger economy, and this 60-day break on immigration is just insanity. It's just like the Texas abortion ban. They're leveraging a terrible situation in order to get policies that serve no one other than their base, that keep them on the hook here. We don't need that kind of leadership. We need the kind of leadership that is pragmatic, that is creating a very comprehensively fixed path to citizenship, one that, again, checks backgrounds, makes sure that people are vetted, but doesn't add so many hurdles and paperwork that we're paying both more for bureaucracy on this end, and then seeing the folks on the other end paying a lot for attorneys, waiting 14, 15 years, working as taxpayers in this country and not able to vote. We can't keep doing that. We need to have a path to citizenship for DACA recipients and their families. And we need to make sure that we are prioritizing our economy and the safety of our country, and the system doesn't do it.
Great answer. Kim, another question from one of our viewers to the town hall is, what in your background do you feel best prepares you to exhibit the characteristics of a successful Congresswoman?
Well, I think having a legacy of service is probably the best thing, because it is way lacking in many of our congressional candidates and in our congressional folks that are sitting on the other side of the aisle right now. And I think that when you have dedicated your life to something beyond your political career and your how you benefit economically, I think that is very telling of the kind of leader you're going to be in Congress. So, and it's not just, my 28-year career, both to our nation as a whole, serving overseas and all across the world and in combat zones. It's also my 3-year dedication, volunteer, because we didn't get paid when we were in the State Guard, helping families in man-made and natural disasters, even after I retired from the military. But it's one thing, to be a trailblazer and to be the first at something, and kind of like, yay for all the women running, because we're going to have a lot of firsts out there. Jean Ortiz and I will be the first female veterans ever elected from the state of Texas to go to the U.S. Congress, which is about damn time, given we have the most vets in our state of any other state in the union. What is important is what you do when you get there. And so what I would say to you, it's cute. We did a post of I graduated out of Del Rio, Texas. I was the first female to graduate from pilot training out of that base. But what I'm most proud of is, I'm proud of the trailblazing, but it's the capacity for us, especially as women and folks that haven't had, fair shots in their lives, is the ability to reach back and grow the next generation up. And we call it a legacy of leadership. And so one of the complaints folks have about Congress and the political system is we don't do well at grooming those to replace us. And I give you the example when, like Candace, you leave the school board right before, your term is over. And, I didn't want the school board to go back to the way it looked before I came on, because there weren't women on it. And so I worked really hard to make sure that my replacement, that the door didn't shut behind me. Because if you're going to make impact in kids' lives, in women's lives, as teachers, as, folks who aren't represented, then you better make sure that those replace you, have that same kind of value system and integrity and things like that as they move forward. So I grew up in an environment in the military in which you were constantly training your replacement because you were going to move to the next step, and that person was going to have to fill your leadership shoes. So I think it's the military career. I think it's the continued service that I've done to the state, both in veterans and in families, working veteran families, to help them along. And then again, in education, I think most of you know, I come from a long line of educators. Both my parents were teachers. All my aunts and uncles taught. I have a degree in teaching. So I believe education, exactly like my opponent said, is the key to our nation and the key to the next generation. And I'll finish with this. The other night we had the Young Dems, and if you're on the call, thank you again for honoring me with your endorsement out of Arlington Young Dems. And they're very concerned about the nation they're walking into. And they pushed back hard. And in a way, I agreed with them. And those of us that are a little bit more seasoned ought to probably listen to them. Look, what they said was, look, we've been touted as the entitled generation. We're snowflakes. We can't handle anything. But they reminded us that they and their parents grew up in the shadow of 9/11. That this generation of kids who are graduating from high school or won't have ceremonies this year know nothing but a nation that's been in war for 2 full decades. They have seen now and elected, and they watched in 2016 a man that most of us found appalling get elected to the most powerful position in the world. And now they're coming out of their schools with massive amounts of debt, 106 digits. They are looking at an economy now that probably will lead to, if we're not right about this, not just a recession in our country, but a global depression in which they got to maneuver their way through. So they have incredible challenges before them. And I just think it's important that we role model the leadership that we can. And a lot of you are, you're out there, we're all singing to the choir here. We all want these changes, but we have to help this next generation grow and bring them up so that they can take over and do what needs to be done. And so I have worked very hard my entire career to advocate and to push folks into leadership position and mentor them in that. And I think it's needed. I really do in our nation today.
Thank you, Ken. I think it's fair, that question to go to Candace as well, as what about your career background or your just being on the earth background, Candace, prepares you to be a good congresswoman?
Well, there are a couple of experiences that I want to really talk about. And it's really important to mention that it's not just having a lot of experience. We know that Donald Trump, we've seen him for many years and he's taken on many titles, but the quality of his experience is frightening, quite frankly. We don't want his type of experience leading this country. And my experience specifically, I talk a lot about growing up, being poor, bouncing around from place to place, and it is, it's a thing that I've lived with to a certain extent. I know that I didn't have any choice, but that experience, again, allowed me to stress test a system that we have to use as most people. A problem that we have with a lot of our leadership is that they approach this from a very academic perspective. I ended up going to college with a lot of these folks. I went to Claremont McKenna College, majored in government, and a lot of the folks there, I mean, I'm sitting here, wondering if my family has lights. My senior year, we didn't always have water. And they're complaining about the maid service. They're complaining about never having to go shopping before, and now they have to go do their own shopping. And a lot of these folks are going to be the folks that end up being able to run for office, or they're writing policy on things that they've never experienced in their lives. And so I have been able to bring that lived experience perspective to the academic perspective. And I've been able to bring that experience to my governance on the board. And I worked hard, again, to take care of our kids, take care of our janitorial staff, take care of our teachers, take care of our food service staff. And to Kim's point about, not training up leadership, I've trained up leadership, not just when I was looking at making sure that I fill a void in leadership for Texas 24, but when I was on the school board, I worked hard for our Justice of the Peace candidate, which sounds kind of weird, but what ends up happening is that he ends up seeing my truancy cases. He directly affects the school to prison pipeline in a great way. And Chris Lopez is a wonderful and compassionate and smart leader. And he understands that the kids that he's serving, the communities he's serving, are kids. I've in this upcoming election, and when I was stepping down, it was the very end of last year, and I was thinking that there would only be a short gap. This is a different scenario, and this is something I'm in discussions about. I have been training folks to take my place. I have been in contact with multiple people running for this seat and giving them the advice and direction that they need in order to lead here. There are going to be people of color on this in this district that are going to continue to lead, and I'm really proud of that. And in my own campaign, I'm actually providing kids and adults the opportunity I didn't get. So when I was at CMC, a lot of the kids their parents got them their swank DC apartments. I can't imagine having a separate apartment from my own as a kid, and help them to get to the internships they needed. I had to go home and work. I went home and I worked at a swimming pool, or the very summer before my senior year, when a lot of these kids are doing the internships that lead them to landing the job. I was taking care of my elderly grandfather as he was dying. And now I have had the opportunity to mentor current students. I bring them into the campaign process. I get women of color, and I have multiple women of color. My finance director is a Latina, which I'm sure you understand, Lillian, is a rarity in this world. And she's trained other women and other women of color in finance. So we're trying to not just get interns so that they'll bring me the coffee and do the grunt work. I am training leaders in every part of my life, and I am so thrilled about that. And it's all about building the kind of system in order to build out an infrastructure in order to take care of people. I can't just win this seat and this be a one-off. And, I've gotten endorsements from these great folks, Ayanna Pressley, Deb Holland, Veronica Escobar, Senator Warren, Julian Castro. I could keep listing them. And it's not important that I've got these huge names, but it's important what they're doing. They're serving as examples of people who are hitting these barriers and going, I need to bring other folks along with me. And they're bringing me up, and they're training me up. And I am so grateful for that experience from them. And I hope to do the same for everyone in my community as well.
Great. That's really important. And that training of people of color in finance, because campaigns are just always missing that. So that's really important. Really important. We'll go back and we'll give you guys, let's see, one more question that we got from the crowd. I'll start with you, Kim. Congressional approval ratings from 2010 until today range between 9 and 30%. Not great. What ideas do you have to improve the approval rate? And what are your ideas on working across the aisle and through bipartisanship?
Yeah. So two things, I got to be in an institution that had approval ratings that were in the 70s, which was the United States military. Even in war, we maintain a high approval rating. And I always found it fascinating that the entity that sent us the war had the lowest approval rating. So he's right on the Gallup polls. I think you increase your approval rating by what I spoke to earlier, which is working for others and not yourself. Is you putting the constituents of TX24 before you, that every day you wake up. When I was a squadron commander, I'd look up and I'd say, what have I done for the care and feeding of my troops? And if congressmen and women stood up and looked at themselves in the mirror every morning and asked that same question, I think Congress might be able to increase how it's being perceived. The problem that we have right now is because we have an administration that is using the kinds of issues that we've been beautifully talking about this afternoon and taking it and driving a wedge between the American people. That's how come he has this base that's showing up on campaign or Capitol steps with full ARs and military garb. This is how he's able to have rallies in which there's such hate spewed out and riot, supposedly, marches, but they end up being somewhat like riots. I mean, that's his MO. And I think it's very, very frightening if you are students of history to understand that if we're allowed to polarize this nation and we can't find people in the middle to bring things together, that it is going to be a long time pulling our country back together, and you won't improve the state of how people view our elected officials, because it's always going to come from a point of where you sit with your tribe. And so the one thing you have to do is be a person who understands how to work across the aisle, how to have, tough conversations about where money should go and who we should support. Every single one of those 430 some odd congressmen and women represent a portion of America, and they have their interests at heart, or they should. And so where can you find common grounds? And I say this as an example when we talk about things like veterans, which folks want to help veterans, but they struggle with unemployment. So do Republicans. They struggle with getting access to health care. So do Republicans. They struggle with, weapons being used, whether it's in domestic abuse, whether it's people don't storm appropriate, and we lose children every day in this country to firearms. Is there not a place where we can find common ground to protect those that we represent? This is how you work across the aisle, because if we stay polarized, and this is what folks don't like in America, we're not going to get the best answer and the best policies out the door. And I think it's important to have folks that understand that. And I think, to the credit of those in TX24, you said that. You said that when you gave me the 11-point lead in a 7-way primary. Tarrant County, you said that when 95% of the precincts came in for our team and 65% of the precincts in Dallas voted for us. You told me the kind of leader that you want. And for that, I am most grateful, and I will assure you we will work very, very hard to make sure that everyone across this great district is represented and we can carry their voices to DC. And I'll close with this. If you've ever worked on the Hill, which I did, I worked on the Hill for several years. It's funny how all the constituents love their congressmen and women. Well, we might not, but for the most part, they love their congressmen and women, but they hate Congress. That's kind of the theme that goes on. How you fix that is you show that the whole body can work together to get things done for the betterment of the country. And then your party. I really think that's where America wants to see us go. So that's what I'd offer you. That's a fabulous question. Good job.
Yeah, these listeners, they have great questions. So Candace, I think it's fair for you to answer that question. Let me just repeat it, that the congressional approval ratings are at an all-time low. And what ideas do you have to improve this approval rating, including whether or not bipartisanship matters to you, or where will you lead from?
And I'll just echo what Kim just said in terms of how people feel about their individual member of Congress versus how they feel about Congress in general. Historically, people have not really loved Congress for a long time. And I don't think I would concern myself too much with the overall congressional approval rating. But I would concern myself with, again, serving everyday families in Texas 24 and in Texas in general. And I've been able to work with Republicans. So this isn't something that's new to me. I've been on a school board, and again, it's a nonpartisan board, but we know where people stand. And I've been in the minority in terms of my own political affiliation. And sometimes I'll say things and people will roll their eyes at me, and then I'll make a case for it and they'll seriously consider it. And that's how I've been able to get things done. You know, in terms of just talking about families in general, and I'm not talking about Democrats. When I'm talking about families, I'm talking about families. And people are tired of corruption. The path to victory for a Democrat in Texas is making sure that we don't have politics as usual. When you have transparency, when you are there to serve your constituents, even when people don't agree with you, they'll still support you because they know who you are and they know where you stand. And, you know, I saw that in my own race. People knew that I was a lefty and I'm a woman of color. And they also knew that I was showing up to the Tea Party forums. I showed up to places that would otherwise have been hostile. And I made a case, and a lot of people liked that case. And that case was that I govern with the community first in my mind and in my heart. And I thoroughly enjoy my kids, my teachers, my staff. I've thoroughly enjoyed being able to serve them, protecting our most vulnerable families by providing paid sick leave. I think it's not unreasonable for people to take time off and not spread COVID-19 or the flu or anything else that they have. Being able to recuperate from illnesses is actually an economically intelligent thing to do, and it's what most people want. And protecting our public schools. One of the most incredible things about many of our locally elected Republicans in Texas 24 is that they were able to work together with folks that they wouldn't necessarily want to. It was very uncomfortable for them to say get behind Julie Johnson. But they understand how important it is to have public schools for democracy. There's not an incapability to work across the aisle for a lot of us. It's just we have a lot of barriers in Congress that involve our money, right? It's one of the reasons I'm pushing for campaign finance reform, because we have folks on both sides that can't get past the din of fundraising and large corporations buying our politicians. It's just one of the reasons I'm not taking any corporate PAC money. We've got incredible public servants, that have the community in mind. And I bring that with me when I governed on the board, and I'm going to take that with me to Congress.
Great. Before we give you guys, gals, a minute to close, just again want to thank our sponsors, Tillotson Law Firm and Honorable Carol and Dan Donovan, as well as the meeting sponsors, Honorable Terry Barker and Dr. Catalina Garcia, and the Hamilton Wingo Law Firm. So just want to make sure folks know that these things take time to put together. And we are very, very happy for these kind of opportunities. And just appreciate everybody joining, and want to give 1 minute to Kim and then to Candace for close, and tell folks how to get involved with your virtual campaigns, or tell us anything else. But if you can keep it to a minute, that'd be great.
Oh, you always ask the impossible, Lillian. Jesus. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for the sponsors of this. Thank you, Carol, for your email, and Lillian for doing this. We sure appreciate you. Again, I want you all to stay well and healthy. You can give us a reach out at kimforcongress.org or kim@kimforcongress.org if you need anything within this district. If I can't do it, I will find somebody who will. We've set that out there lots of times. We have a portal on our website, all things COVID, like I said, and about mail-in. It connects you to the Secretary of State. I will close with saying this. We sit on an abyss in this nation to fundamentally change the course of how we take her for the next 2 to 3 decades. We sit in a moment in time that Texas hasn't seen in 3 decades. And what I would offer to you is to ask yourself this: who do you want to send to Congress, just in case Trump does get reelected, to take that on? And what I would offer to you is, I would hope you answer like you did during the primary, that you want someone who is tough, who's been and put boots on the ground, who has rebuilt things, who's seen what works, what doesn't, what happens when there's no political will, who's battle tested, and who has, as one said, a warrior, but the heart of a mother. I have a daughter that's out of work right now because of COVID. I lost a cousin. I have a brother who's struggling with pancreatic cancer and yet can't get meds for his pain. I have a grandson that I want to inherit this earth so he can have clean water, clean air, clean food to eat. And I have a husband that just found out yesterday that he's going to be laid off too. So I am dealing with everything all the working families are right now. And I have a mama that I'm concerned about who sits in Virginia all by herself right now, and I can't get to her, which is very, very stressful. Those of you that are taking care of elderly parents know this. So all of us are intertwined across this earth. We are all intertwined across our state, and we're intertwined across this great district. And I hope by July the 14th, when we get this done, then you will all wrap behind us, and we will take on the thing that is the real threat in this district, which is having another 2 years of a Republican that's tied to the person like Trump. And that's what Beth Van Dyne is. And we have to do everything in our power to send a message to the Republicans and send a message to the nation as a whole that Texas is ready for something different. I'm Kim Olsen, and I'm working hard to be your Congresswoman, TX24. Thanks all.
Thank you, Kim. Okay, Candace, let's get your wrap up. And again, thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you so much for moderating, Lillian, and thank you so much to the Texas Democratic Party for allowing us to have this forum. It's so critical that we're able to communicate with each other, even as we are maybe locked in our bathroom because this is the only place we can keep the toddler out. My name's Candace Valenzuela. I'm running for United States Congress in Texas's 24th district, and I am so proud of the coalitions that I've been able to build and the momentum we've been able to gain throughout this process. I am the best shot at taking on Trump endorsee and self-professed conservative squad member Beth Van Dyne, because why should evil be original? Because look, she fits a profile that this district is looking for, which is a mother that is concerned about making ends meet and is concerned about our schools and our families. But Beth is not that, and we know that about her. But most of you who are here are attuned to the political process and remember very well what it was like to have Beth in Irving. I know I do. And it was terrible to see what she did to that young man who brought a clock he'd built to school, and he was so proud of it. And she tried to defund the police. We understand and we remember that, and we know that the best shot against her is going to be another mother who's fought tough battles her whole life and has been able to leverage all of those things that have happened to her to serve others. And I am, again, just so pleased to have the endorsement of Jan McDowell, of Julie Johnson, and of all of the other great folks that understand that leadership happens in coalitions, not in a silo. And even if Trump is elected again, we're going to be able to build up here in North Texas, because that has been the trajectory. We just need the power and the work, and I'm doing just that. Please join me at cv4c.com. And my name's Candace Valenzuela, running for Texas 24. I look forward to virtually seeing you in the upcoming days and weeks.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kim Olsen. Thank you, Candace Valenzuela. Thank y'all for all the work you do. I know how hard it is to run a race, and people, unless you've done it, they just can't. I mean, you're just putting your lives on hold. So thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining us. And thank you to our sponsors, and thank you to the leadership of the Dallas County Democrats for putting this on. Thanks. See y'all soon.